You're listening to Solera Innovation Labs, where automotive experts from around the world discuss technology trends in mobility and debate tomorrow's rules of the road. Whether you're a technician, a dealer, an appraiser, a car lover, or anything in between, we'll discuss topics that will keep you up to date and help you and your business win. Welcome everyone to the Solera Innovation Labs podcast. I'm Neil Lowell, your host of Ready, Set, Go, where I explore modern and future services, experiences, and technologies in the automotive industry and beyond. Today we'll be talking about a topic that's top of mind for many of our listeners, both insurers and repair shops alike, and that is the evolution and automation of the collision repair estimate. I'm joined by two special guests today that will help shed some light on the drivers and effects of this transformation. First, we have Frank Boothman, 37-year industry veteran with over 30 years of repair estimating experience. Welcome, Frank.
Hello, glad to be here.
Next, we have Miran Shahinian. Miran specializes in advanced modern-day technologies such as neuro-linguistic programming, computational linguistics, predictive modeling, and visual analytics. He has led teams that have created some of the fundamental search technologies used by some of the largest tech companies like Microsoft. Miran's currently leading Solera's Advanced Data Technologies group. Welcome, Miran.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
So, Frank and Miran, today I want to explore the exciting world of collision estimating. Let's start with Frank. So, Frank, let's go back a ways. Let's go back 30 years. Let's go back to the mid-'80s.
Okay.
Where you started your career, right? So to give our listeners kind of a flashback, the first Macintosh was just created with 128 kilobytes of memory, weighed 16 and a half pounds. Windows 1.0 was just released. The Polaroid camera was just released. And Nokia released the world's first mobile phone, weighing it at a whopping 11 pounds. So talk to me about what collision estimating was like back then.
Okay, so outside of floppy disks, I would say everything was done manually. We did everything off of collision books. You had collision crash guides that you would utilize, and everything was done with a pen and a paper, and also copy paper, the blue copy paper you put between
the carbon paper.
Carbon paper,
yeah.
Thank you. The carbon paper, you get that all over your hands, and that's basically how you did it. You had to know the inside and outside operations. You had to know what was included operations. You had to deduct for overlap. It was a complete manual process.
So, how were photos taken?
That's a funny question because there was a thing called Polaroid cameras. I guess they're resurgence lately of the little ones, but you had to take Polaroid cameras. Everything was either black and white or color back then. You had to staple the photos to papers. You had to write down the claim number, all of that fun stuff. And, it was an arduous task. Not only did you have to complete estimates, but you had to be pretty darn good at stapling and filing.
So how long did it take to write an estimate back then?
Wow. Easily an hour and a half.
Wow. And it was all manual. So
all manual.
All up to the person creating the estimate to get it right.
And that's if you were fast, right? If you were really good and able to do your calculations fast and get everything nailed down in a systematic approach, kind of like a computer would do it for you today, maybe an hour and a half you were really pumping.
And back in your early days, you were working on estimating for collision repair shops, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And what was the relationship like between the collision repair shops and the insurance companies in the manual days?
It was probably more face-to-face, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not probably, it was definitely more face-to-face. You had more interaction with your local adjuster. You had more relationships built between yourself and those adjusters. You pretty much knew everybody. Everybody had a territory. So you got to know your folks pretty well.
Okay, excellent. So now let's fast forward 15 years, right? 1990s into the 2000s now. So Windows is, dominating the marketplace. We have laptops, we have digital cameras. Actually, the world's first camera phone came out in the year 2000. And so how has the introduction of the computer and Windows and portability for the first time affected estimating?
First thing I thought of was digital cameras, right? Because we finally got rid of those Polaroids and having to drop your 35 millimeter film off at a drugstore and then pick it up an hour later. So we went to digital cameras, but we also had Pen Pro. So we got away from, we didn't talk earlier, just slightly after the manual process with the crash guides. We had audit text with the laminated sheets, and you would circle all the parts that were damaged, and you would write everything in code: I for repair, L for finish, E for replace. So then we got into Pen Pro, and it became pretty much automated. So you still had to input everything and, just select the parts that you wanted, much like you do today. But you'd have to, the good news is you had a printer that you could carry around with you,
Right.
and it would print everything up, and you were able to hand a customer an estimate in a matter of minutes compared to, hours.
Yeah, estimators became much more fit, right? A lot of gear to carry around.
A lot of gear, yes. Although we did have to carry all those laminated sheets around with us in the trunk of the car, but you had to lug those around from time to time. But you had a laptop you could carry around with you. You had a printer you could carry around with you, and it really became became more customer facing, because you would hand the customer the estimate and you would talk to them. You could actually, at that time, we could write checks to the customer.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very more customer friendly and fast service.
Good. So you said hour and a half on the efficient side, back in the 80s. What are we at now in 2000s?
Probably on a good day in a drive-in, about 30 minutes.
Okay. Excellent. That's for a smaller estimate. Still a lot of manual work, but it's now putting into a computer. It's now electronically submitted.
Drivable estimates.
Excellent. So now let's fast forward to today, another 15, 20 years beyond that. Well, going almost 20 years. How has it changed since then?
I would say, a lot of the changes that we've seen are automation.
Mm-hmm.
We've gone from writing estimates to screening estimates that are prepared through some electronic or smart data, if you would. I mean, we actually have the capability now to take a picture of a car and print out an estimate that is completed for us. And then we go through that estimate and review it to see if it's accurate. So rather than us inputting each damage entry, we've switched to reviewing estimates that are automatically created for us.
Excellent. So more and more is being automated. More and more, let's say, cognitivity is coming from the computer itself. And that's changing the role of the estimator as it is today.
Absolutely.
Okay, excellent. Miran, let's bring you into the mix here. Let's talk about some of the technology. So kind of a flashback into the early millennium. You were leading a team at a company called All the Web, which was later acquired by Yahoo. As I understand it, you created revolutionary technology that changed the speed at which we're able to access, query, find data. Tell me a little bit about that.
Originally, majority of the algorithms were created in 70s. The proliferation of computing power enabled us to string many computers together to access billions and billions of web pages. The search engine was called All the Web, and at the time it was the world's largest search engine. About 1.5 billion pages string together from about 2,000 servers together. And that was at the time was the underpinnings of web, in a way, finding what you do with Google today. As the technology matured, different technologies came in. It became the foundation of the sort of current modern data technologies of liberating locked data that was typically was locked up in sort of purpose-built databases. So being able to ask a question with a natural language query, how do I change oil for this machine, or where is this restaurant? It was really a natural way of accessing data without writing some specific code or something, which is pretty much a daily activity for everyone today. But it's important to say that the hardware and software enabled each other to be more efficient.
Sure. As the hardware became more powerful, the software could do more with that.
Exactly. And packing the footprint enabled, especially for, let's say, AI, purpose-built AI hardware now for self-driving cars, making a portable computing more and more powerful, enables a host of advanced applications.
So how did this affect the companies that were on the cusp of early adoption, right? So this new technology came out. We have all this data that's now being unlocked or being made more transparently available, and the search engines are giving us access to that. So what happened to the companies that were adopting search and using search for their businesses?
What really happened is that the companies that were able to overlay disparate data sets to answer more questions took an incredible advantage forward for their companies. An isolated data set that, let's say, has information, for instance, about particular part transaction is probably not as helpful if you overlay with several other data sets and say, what do I know about this part? This part has been used at this 10 different vehicles. This part fails more frequently. This part is more warranted together. And this all comes together by essentially combining a bunch of data sets, let's say with search technology or big data technology, different lookup tables or that actually scale. Versus in early days, you had the purpose-built databases that didn't really scale really well.
So a world of static data to a world of linked data, right? Where we can get a lot more intelligence out of combining different data sets. So let's fast forward to today. How has the computational power and the algorithms and the technology advanced throughout the years? And what world are we living in now and as far as technology is?
It all is working its way towards more advanced question answering systems like Amazon Alexa that everyone uses today. It's, for instance, if you are a technician in working in a garage, sooner than later you should be able to wear an augmented reality device like Microsoft HoloLens, look at the intersection of the car. The car can tell you exactly which sensor is failed, and you will be able to look up real-time the manual or repair procedures, bring the overlay onto your screen, and no more sort of fiddling within the manuals. So everything, again, converging data from disparate sources and bringing just the relevant data in front of you.
Excellent. So if we bring these two together, we look at the advancements of the technology, right? Where we, 30 years ago, where we just had the introduction of the computer, right? And if we rewind 30 years ago and think about where we are today, it's really an unfeasible kind of outcome for most people, right? So when we're writing estimates by paper, just to tell you back then, Frank, 30 years ago, in 30 years, you're going to be able to click a single button or take a single picture or take a series of pictures and have all of your work be automatically done for you. Is that even feasible? Is that even something that you can comprehend in the 30 year ago, Frank?
Never could I imagine that you could take a picture and have an estimate automatically generated from that photo. That is just something I could never, beyond my wildest dreams.
Yeah, but what I'm hearing now, this is the technology, the world we live in, right? The advancements of the technology, and Maren, some of the stuff you're talking about is going beyond even what we've seen today. Taking the data from the car, which is very feasible, connecting it with technology, wearable technology, AI technology, and connecting that together in an experience which not only brings more intelligence, more power, more efficiency to the system, but it also greatly transforms the person that's in the role today. Right. So, Frank, let's talk about that a little bit. So the role of the estimator 30 years ago is drastically different than the role of the estimator today. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a heavy reliance upon data and upon technology today. Everything can get done faster, and faster translates into better customer service. The faster you can get to the vehicle, the more organized you can produce an estimate. The faster you can get it in the customer hands, the faster you can get the car repaired. All those things translate into a great customer service experience.
Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about that customer experience. I'm glad you brought that up. So as the estimator, as their job gets more and more assisted by technology, that means that their job focuses more and more on the customer and or the efficiency. Right. So what do we have to worry about when we introduce technology, or what should we worry about or think about or take note about with regards to the customer?
Yeah, I think the main point is technology is a great thing, but technology being introduced for the sake of being introduced is not always a great thing. So my example would be several years ago there was a vehicle manufacturer, we won't call them out, who came up with a fantastic way to control the infotainment system in their vehicle, and it failed miserably because nobody could figure out how to work it. It was too difficult. Car sales plummeted for that particular brand because they put it universally across all their models, and it really didn't lead to a good customer experience. So a customer, when you introduce technology, there has to be a perceived value. They have to gain something from it. They have to see what the value of it is. And if you're just going to introduce technology that's not going to benefit them in any way, shape, or form in their eyes, it could actually work against you. It could hurt your brand. It could hurt your sales. It could hurt a lot of things. So we have to be very careful that when we introduce technology, there's a perceived benefit to the customer.
Excellent. Totally agree. Customer first. Okay. So automated estimate, buzzword, reality, or fad? What do you guys think?
Reality in the near future. If you look at the current vehicles, they already come with AI hardware.
Mm-hmm.
They're already coming equipped with cameras. There is no reason that vehicle, it already has impact sensors. It can estimate itself. The parts, the data set is already there for what the parts are. You have sort of impact sensors. You can also take that software and essentially fly a drone that can take those photos and estimate it and pre-populate it. Now, the key here is obviously to have that accurate. The accurate estimate, the accuracy improved by feeding more data and more models. For instance, you can look at the historical estimations and say, these parts also require these other parts. And Solera is some of the technology like intelligent repair estimators, where they understand the impact points and the part composition under the surface that makes this estimation accuracy really high. And that decreases the friction along the entire supply chain from start to finish of the process completing, and increases the customer satisfaction because everything takes a lot shorter and it's a lot more accurate and everyone is happy along the chain.
Excellent. So if I distill this back down to the basic and kind of think about even 30 years ago, as we talked about 20, 30 years ago, it all comes down to the data sets and connectivity of those data sets so that we can leverage them, right?
Correct.
The data coming from the sensors, the data coming from the cameras, connected to the data about the vehicle, about the parts, about the labor, all connected so that we can compute it in one single stream for one single output.
Exactly. And then the data that is being generated is also useful for manufacturers to adjust, to build the model in such a way that is safer for the customers, safer for drivers, and also safer for and easier to repair.
Excellent. And I'm glad you brought up the easier, because sometimes it's overlooked, the ease of repair, the efficiency of repair, the cost of repair. And I know that's a very hot topic as costs continue to skyrocket of the cost of the repair due to the complexity.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, we as consumers, as vehicle owners, as drivers, we pay for that in increased insurance premiums, right? Because the money has to come from somewhere.
Correct.
So good. So on the data part, let's talk about that a little bit. So data connecting together, using automated engine, using AI technologies to drive an automated output. But all of that assumes that the data is accurate, right? That we have a solid data set to compute from, right?
Mm-hmm. You are absolutely correct. Different data sets use different nomenclature to log their specifics. We use different techniques to, for instance, neural networks, just like for instance, Google Translate to translate from one language to another. We use neural networks to translate from one nomenclature to another nomenclature to create a global data set. Mm-hmm. Autotext uses its own nomenclature that essentially brings in different data sets and globalizes that nomenclature so the data is normalized across the board and it's meaningful for everyone that is looking for it. We also can translate that data out to interoperate with some of our partners that also consume KPIs or various statistics that are helpful for them to be efficient. So the proliferation of machine learning techniques or big data techniques and interoperability has helped greatly creating sort of a unified view of the entire cycle of collision repair from start to finish.
Got it. So the linkage of data is critical. And if I kind of think about this in another way, you're saying the crash information of a vehicle has to translate to the next data set in line.
Yes.
In order for it to interpret what the vehicle is, what the makeup of the vehicle is, what the configuration is, yes, and how that collision impacts the parts that are damaged.
Absolutely.
And then we have to translate that and what parts are damaged into where the damage is, how to repair it, yes, and translate that into the repair time and the repair methodology needed to repair the vehicle.
Yes.
Excellent. So that brings up, Frank, I'm going to turn it back to you for a second here. So what outstanding pieces are still estimated manually by the estimators today?
So a couple of things I was thinking of as Marion was speaking, and that is not to segue from your question, but because there's so much technology advancement in vehicles, there's different materials being used, and you have to treat these materials and repair these materials, if you can even repair these materials, differently. So the data set will give us kind of like a close enough, like it gets us close to an estimate, but it's really important that we do the research so that we know what's coming out. We know what the new metals are. We know how they're going to react in a crash. We know the price of these sensors and how they're going to impact the value of the estimates. So I just wanted to get that out there.
Yeah, the complexity of vehicles is certainly increasing at a phenomenal rate.
So fast, and really, really important that it's good to have the data, but we also have to couple that with research, because if we just have the data without the research, we're kind of left to, I guess, I wouldn't say false predictability, but it's better to have that research coupled with that data, and that way we're more accurate going forward.
So the usage of only historical data for a predictive future view is only going to give you what was done in the past. It's
Correct.
not what you need to do in today's or in the future technologies or vehicles.
It's
right?
great to
So
have.
It has to be combined.
Couple it with the research,
Yes.
and that'll get you to where you need to be for the future.
Absolutely. So doing the research on the vehicles, understanding how the new vehicles are being created, the new metals, the new repair procedures, all of that into the data set as well, so that we can connect it, again, as Miriam said, to all of the other data sets so that we get the most accurate automated answer. But what other, so the part prices, that's automated. We have those calculated. We know what's being offered. We know where it is. The replacement times, we know that information. What about repair times? Let's talk about that, because isn't that one of the few outstanding items that's still being manually estimated today?
Well, here in the U.S., we don't have as much of this automated repair times, but if you look at our counterparts in Europe, they do actually have a system where the repair time is calculated. They use historical data. They also use research to look at access to where the damage is, the type, the thickness of the material, what other objects may need to be removed from around that area, and they will give you a time, using past data for the size and location, and it will give you a unit hours of how much time it's going to take to repair that damage. And the good news about that is that it takes away that subjectivity. It takes away the appraiser saying it needs 5 hours and the body shop saying it needs 10 hours. They can focus on the research, again, thickness of the metal, type of damage, location, and use those elements and the research data to come up with the repair hours. So you can focus on other things instead of having that subjectivity with repair hours. You can focus on other things like getting the car through the shop faster and getting it back to the customer.
Okay, excellent. So one of the last milestones of an automated estimate, automated in a way that gives us more accurate data, much more efficient. So good. We've talked about the data. We've talked about the connectivity of the data and some of the technologies that in computational power that's now allowing us to actually connect the data, but also bringing it back to the historical data must be combined with the research so that the computation outputs the most accurate answer for the vehicle in front of you, not just an answer of the vehicles of the past. So all this is leading to a world where, one, estimator's job is drastically changing because it's going from an experience-based role where they have to know how a vehicle is repaired to more of a customer-centric role, as you mentioned, Frank, where they're focused more on the customer interaction, more on collecting the data for the computers to process, less about actually telling the computer how the repair needs to be done, right?
Less manual input, more reliance upon technology and data.
And this is also changing the location of the estimator, right? So estimators were largely, out in the field, driving around, visiting customers, actually physically looking at the cars, and that's changing, right?
That is absolutely changing. If you take a look at just maybe 5 years ago, not to sit here and quote, different channel mixes, but if you look at just the job itself, an appraiser gets in the car, has to drive to 7 different locations. There could be all different types of obstacles during that. If it's traffic, the car breaking down, anything along those lines. They are able to see maybe 7 vehicles a day on a good day. And then you look at taking that out and putting it on a desk where the appraiser receives his assignments, he receives good photographs, good documentation, and he's able to do 20 a day. And that is just so much more efficient, not only for the company, but again, back to the customer. They get their estimate faster. They're able to go to the repair shop and get their vehicle repaired sooner. It's just a faster channel. And so, yeah, it is changing from that field, the way we used to do things in the field, and now we're doing a lot more across the desk.
Excellent. And if we go to the shop perspective as well, the collision repair shop, it benefits them as well, right? Because they're getting a faster connection to the customer in that actual repair job.
It can benefit them. It can benefit them, but obviously it would be contingent upon estimate accuracy, right? If you get an estimate that's really nowhere near what the damage is, that's not going to benefit anybody. It doesn't benefit the insurance company, doesn't benefit the customer, certainly doesn't benefit the shop if there are needless supplements. So, it's important that the person completing that estimate is using a very powerful estimating tool and has the knowledge to use that tool and the skills to use that tool efficiently.
So the accuracy of the data is absolutely critical for all of this to work.
Absolutely critical.
Now, once the shop gets the estimate, and we haven't gotten here yet, but where we're heading in the land of automation, presumably the customer gets connected to the shop faster. The shop automatically gets the estimate for the repair faster, and theoretically can automatically order the parts and get that delivered to the shop faster, right? Which means that the entire process is more efficient, means cost is removed from the system, means insurance rates are lower, but it also means the customer gets to get their car back on the road faster, right?
Absolutely. If you consider where we came from, specialized knowledge to books, to CDs, to online search engines, and soon to voice interfaces and augmented reality, the new generation is where the machines talk to each other and make decisions themselves throughout the entire supply chain. And this makes it easier for, as you said, keeping the customer informed, because that's the most important thing, informing the customer where collision is not a pleasant event. And the goal is to make that event as smooth as possible throughout the entire supply chain. So the faster you can get to the point before the collision for the customer, the better it is for the customer satisfaction. And machines powered by smarter data, better decision making can automate that greatly.
Excellent. As long as the customer wins in the situation, right?
As long as the technology is a perceived benefit to the customer, absolutely.
Excellent. So exciting future, exciting actually modern day technology, all of it coming together to really revolutionize. I think we're in that next big cycle of shift in the industry, right? Going from paper to computer, now from computer to automation. What's next? I mean, you talked about wearable technology. We've heard from the auto manufacturers, they're working on self-healing, technology where even, the minor accidents, the minor repairs that happen to panels can automatically be healed. Autonomous vehicles. What about autonomous repairs? I mean, in the manufacturing business, the majority of cars today are built by robots. They're not built by humans as they were back in the day. Is it feasible for repairs to be done automatically? Where do you guys think we're going to be 15 years from now?
It could be that with the introduction of electrical vehicles that have much fewer parts than internal combustion engines, you could have swappable parts, sort of like a Lego bricks, but still the weight and they might require, different parts might require specialized equipment. But undoubtedly that mechanical components that used to be prevalent in internal combustion engines are being replaced by software-driven components that are a lot easier to understand their behavior during, whether it's during runtime, whether it's during the idle time or offline time. Additionally, the computing power that's being shifted to the vehicle can enable a host of different applications, whether it's powering your whole house at night or potentially using vehicle just as a computing engine for you for smart home while it's idle. So there's going to be, in a way, shift of a computing power due to self-driving, or let's say level 3, level 4 self-autonomous driving, towards vehicles. And at that point, it doesn't make sense to have several CPUs in the house. The vehicle would be good enough to power certain activities.
Kind of a central hub.
Central hub,
yeah.
Exactly.
You talked earlier about the advancements in technology, and with the advancement of the use of plastics and all these advanced plastics and advanced metals, I'm sure eventually we'll be at the point where we will see self-healing parts on cars, or the customer damages a part on the car, they'll be able to go to their 3D printer and have it printed up overnight in a matter of a couple of hours and be ready to install it on the car rather easily. Like you said, Lego technology, right? Snap off the old one and snap on the new one and off you go. So I think it's, sounds strange to us today, but who knows?
Everything retrospectively does, though. I mean, if you, again, if we go back 30 years and think about where we are today, most of our minds couldn't imagine that. Excellent. So we're in this, as we talked about, this transformational age. We have a lot of technology coming at us from a lot of different directions. We have a lot of buzzwords. We have AI and predictive technology and visual intelligence, and it can be daunting for many of our listeners when they're thinking about the adoption, right? In the collision repair shop, what do I adopt? What's really going to move the needle? What's not? What's going to streamline my business and bring down costs while increasing customer satisfaction? Same thing in the insurance industries. How do I reduce my cost, but not at the expense of the customer, at the experience, at the speed, or certainly, as you mentioned, at the sake of accuracy, right? We have to keep that accuracy as high as we can. So what advice do you guys have for our listeners who are thinking about how to adopt this technology, or how to test this technology, or what direction they should look at?
High level, you would have to always start with a customer and work yourself backwards and fill in the gaps that you have. Certain technologies could be in a transition period where they are not mature enough, and that's the choice you have to make, whether you want to be an early adopter or jump in while this technology is mature. Each part has its own advantages. For instance, object detection, detecting damages from a picture, has its own benefits once it's automatically built into your workflow or estimating workflow. That can save big time, right?
Yeah, I'm going to say, again, it does come down to the customer. Obviously, we want to make sure that we're addressing the customer needs and we know what the customer needs are. Secondly, we want to make sure that, my advice would be to make sure that you're using technology that is forward looking, obviously. And, for me, when I think about the choices out there, again, not to start a commercial, but making sure that it's using technology that's vehicle specific, option driven, inside out procedural database, knowing that when they write that car and it's going to be looking at the furthest point inward and then working its way outward, that you're getting an accurate appraisal. That the overlap is accounted for, and you're not going to have to go through and start looking at different notes here or there to figure out what I have to add to that appraisal. Is it included? Is it not included? It's all done for me. I can breeze through that, use that technology to my advantage, and give a very accurate appraisal to the insurance company or to the customer, knowing that I feel secure about what's on that estimate. I've captured all that damage, and I'm not going to have to come back later for supplements for something that I didn't consider when I wrote that estimate. To me, that's an advantage. I couldn't stress that enough. Having that advantage every time I look at a car or repair a car, I know that I have that working for me. Then I know I'm going to be a leader in the game.
Data comes back to the data.
I agree. I think the technology should be an enabler, and AI should be transparent, so you don't have to make specific choices for if this is AI enabled or not. The accuracy and the ease of estimation and the speed of estimation should probably dictate what your choices should be. But AI or ML are background technologies that enable the overall process to be frictionless.
Excellent. So to kind of recap what we've talked about, first of all, it's all about the data. If you don't have the core data, if you don't have the intelligence or the accuracy in the data, then the models fall apart. And secondly, in today's technology, with all of the computational power, with all the algorithms, we're finally at a point where we can connect all these disparate data sets together intelligently to automate a lot of what was previously done manually.
Correct.
And we talked about how the automation is key for the accuracy of the data and the automation, but it still comes down to the customer. We got to put the customer first. We got to make sure that the customer experience is continuously improving and that we don't hinder the customer experience at the expense or at the flip side of just introducing technology because the technology is out there, right? And so the advice that you guys have given to our listeners, adopt the technology. I mean, it's not slowing down anytime soon, right? If anything, it's going to speed up. However, do so carefully with the right data, the right selection, the right testing, and the right customer experience.
Absolutely.
Right. Exciting world. I think there's a lot more that we could dive into, but I appreciate you guys joining us today. On future podcasts, we're going to dive into some of these technologies a little deeper, like the visual intelligence, understanding how the photo-based estimating process is affecting our customers, how the data sets are continuing to evolve through the research, and what other challenges we have coming up through the adoption of some of these technologies, diving in a little deeper on some of the specifics. But I really appreciate you guys today joining us. I appreciate the listeners here tuning in. I hope this was helpful to understand kind of where we've been, where we're going, and what you should be thinking about as you adopt the technology. Thanks again, Frank and Maren, for joining us today, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in. We hope this helps shed some light on the evolution of automated estimating and the technology and data that's powering this exciting future as you get ready, set, and go for adoption. Until next time, this is Neil Lowell, your host, signing off. Solera Innovation Labs is a podcast produced by Solera, a global leader in data-driven solutions and services. Solera collects and translates complex data into actionable insights for automotive, identity, and property partners across 90 countries and counting. Learn more at solera.com or find us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.